Sorry to have kept you waiting, but we needed to put a few things together. First off, I'd like to commend the performance today of the members of Engine 158 based here in Staten Island, the New York City Fire Department, as well certainly as the men and women of the New York City Police Department who are engaged in this morning's activities, specifically those with the hostage negotiation team and those with our emergency service unit. Joining me at the podium here today is Mayor de Blasio, also Fire Commissioner Don Nigro, Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce, Chief Harry Whedon, who heads up our Special Bureau's Special Services, the Emergency Service Unit, and Lieutenant Jack Cambria, who heads up our hostage negotiation team, all of whom will speak, along with Chief of Patrol Carlos Gomez, who was at the scene this morning. At approximately 5:45 a.m. this morning, members of the Regional Fugitive Task Force, consisting of 4 U.S. Marshals and 4 New York City detectives, attempted to take an individual into custody in connection with a federal probation warrant at 15 Destiny Court in the confines of the 121 Precinct here in Staten Island. This location is a multiple family dwelling. The subject of the warrant was Garland Tyree, T-Y-R-E-E, a 38-year-old male. As the task force members approached the front door of the basement apartment of this residence, they observed a thick smoke coming from the apartment. At this point, they notified the New York City Fire Department. As responding firefighters from Engine 158 attempted to assess the nature of the smoke, they were met by gunfire from inside the basement apartment. One fire lieutenant was struck twice in the lower extremities. A task force team member fired 1 shot while extricating the lieutenant from the apartment. The lieutenant was transported to Richmond University Medical Center and is in stable condition. At that point, a safety perimeter was established, and NYPD emergency services units and hostage negotiation teams were summoned to the location. At around 6:15 a.m. this morning, a hostage negotiating team attempted to establish contact with the subject. At around 7:30 a.m., the hostage negotiator contacted the subject on his cell phone and actually began a dialogue. During the course of this standoff, the suspect fired his weapon on 3 separate occasions. No additional injuries were sustained, and no one returned fire in response to those 3 separate incidents. For the next 4 hours, there were periodic conversations with the hostage negotiators on both the cell phone and a dedicated line that was provided to the subject. During the discussions, the subject requested to speak to certain family members. The Detective Bureau contacted those members immediately and brought them to the scene. We actually flew one of the members from Delaware in one of our department helicopters. During this period, he had telephone conversations with his sister, girlfriend, and his mother. Lieutenant Jack Cambria, who heads up our hostage negotiation team, will provide some details regarding the negotiation process. Jack has been doing this for 14 years as head of the team, has done thousands upon thousands of these negotiations. It should go without saying, but it cannot go without saying, that this is not the way we want these kinds of negotiations to end. The vast majority of the time, the hundreds and even thousands of times we do these each year, it is not how it ends. The officers in this scene were exemplary today, despite the outcome. It's hard work, and they did it well. We want these situations to end with everyone safe, but it's the public safety that takes precedence. We exist to keep people safe. Lieutenant Cambria will give you an update on the negotiations that he had along with some of his team members during the course of the morning. Lieutenant?
Thank you, Commissioner. Good afternoon. The members of the hostage negotiation team first established contact with Mr. Tyree at approximately 7:30 this morning. We spoke to him for approximately 4 hours throughout, and his main indicator was that he would surrender. Those were his words. He would surrender when his mom came to the scene, physically to the scene. It presented some challenges in the fact that the mom was in Delaware, but arrangements were made. Our aviation unit then flew to Delaware in order to pick her up and transported her back here to Staten Island. Finally, when we got the mom physically on the scene with us in our hostage truck, I sat down with her and started to coach her as to the type of things that we wanted her to say. There was a very brief encounter, maybe 3 minutes, I would say, and they exchanged that they loved each other, and at that point, Mr. Tyree indicated that he was going to surrender. Again, his words. to come out. And it was at that point that I alerted the emergency service unit commander that he was coming out so they can be ready for that to come. Commissioner?
I'd like to introduce Chief Harry Whedon, who heads up our Special Operations Bureau, which among its units is the Emergency Service Unit that was present in large numbers on the scene this morning. Harry?
Good afternoon, everyone. Immediately upon being told by Lieutenant Cameron at the mail Mr. Tyree was going to come out and surrender, we heard gunshots were fired through a window on one side of the building. These gunshots struck a private vehicle and one of our department vehicles. Immediately after that, Mr. Tyree exited the building on the other side of the building from the basement apartment, coming out firing rounds, numerous rounds, striking two of our department vehicles and a house behind our department vehicles. Our officer immediately returned fire. Mr. Tyree fell back towards the house. We went down with a tactical medic to check on his condition, and unfortunately he was expired at that point. Upon getting into the building, we found a commercial-grade smoke bomb that was actually set off this morning that caused a smoke condition when the fire department had responded early this morning.
Thank you. Mayor de Blasio, and then Commissioner Nigro will make comments, and then we will open it up for your questions relative to this event this morning. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Bratton. Look, this was a very challenging day for our first responders, for our police officers, for our firefighters, for our EMTs. But it's a day when they all handled their jobs in an exemplary fashion. There's a lot to be proud of today in the way our first responders handled something you just can't be fully prepared for. It was a very challenging and dynamic situation. But this proves once again that we have the finest police, and finest firefighters, the finest EMTs anywhere in this nation. I spent some time at the hospital with Lieutenant James Hayes, an extraordinary man. I want you to know right now, and just to give you the facts, a 31-year veteran of the FDNY, a proud Staten Islander. And I talked before I went in, Commissioner Nigro and I talked with some of his colleagues, some of the firefighters from Engine 158, and the clear respect they had for their lieutenant to begin with, that was obvious. But the fact that their lieutenant was the one to make the tough decision to go in to what was obviously a dangerous situation, that only added to the respect of the men who he leads. They told the story after they heard the shots ring out of helping with other police personnel to get the lieutenant out of that situation and get him to safety. And by the way, everyone who helped get Lieutenant Hayes to safety put themselves in harm's way in the process. And they all are to be commended for their bravery and their quick thinking. But I have to say, Lieutenant Hayes, very, very impressive, got elected, was making light of his injuries, thank God. Thank God his injuries were as limited as they are. And that really is extraordinary given the situation he was in. We spent time together, including with his wife, his brothers, his son and daughter, a wonderful family, and someone that we should be profoundly proud of. He didn't hesitate to serve this city and to go into harm's way, not only in the context of what appeared to be a fire, but obviously in the context in which there was a dangerous person there as well. I mentioned the skill and the capacity of our first responders. Again, a lot of people involved in this operation, and a very complicated operation indeed. Of course, again, want to thank Commissioner Bratton and Commissioner Nigro for their leadership, Chief of Detectives Bob Boyce, Chief of Patrol Carlos Gomez, the Borough Commander, Chief Della Torre. You heard from Lieutenant Jack Cambria. He does extraordinary work through the hostage negotiation team, incredibly difficult work, and we thank him for all he's done. And to Assistant Chief Harry Whedon and Assistant Chief Vincent Giordano, we thank you. The commanding officer here at the 121, Deputy Inspector Terrence Hurston, the U.S. Marshals represented by Charles Dunn. I want to thank the elected officials who have been supportive of our first responders always and today as well. State Senator Diane Savino, Assemblymember Michael Cusick, and Councilmember Debbie Rose. Also should note at the hospital, the president of the UFOA, Jake LaMonda, was there in support of his member. As the commissioner indicated, All of these first responders, and in particular, the men and women of the NYPD, did all that their training told them to try and end this situation peacefully. The NYPD really went the extra mile here, sending a helicopter to bring the mother of this individual up to try and defuse the situation, having the finest hostage negotiators anywhere around. The NYPD showed extraordinary restraint and care in this situation. Thank God no members of the NYPD were hurt, no surrounding residents of the neighborhood were hurt. That was all because of the quality of the work that was done here today. It was a patient, careful strategy, and one that, even though the ultimate goal was not achieved of a peaceful surrender, all the other goals of protecting the life of community residents and of our first responders were achieved. The people of Staten Island should be particularly proud of the first responders who serve here, and we should remember and support them every day. And I just ask all New Yorkers to join me in celebrating, in particular, Lieutenant Hayes, and wishing him a very speedy recovery. With that, I'd like to bring his commanding officer up to the podium, Fire Commissioner Dan Nigro.
Yes, for a day, this could have certainly been a tragic day for the New York City Fire Department, and thankfully, Lieutenant Hayes is recovering in the hospital with his family, and for us, we are quite thankful. We responded just after 6 o'clock to what apparently was a fire. It turns out, as Commissioner Bratton stated, to be a smoke grenade, and Lieutenant Hayes was speaking with the occupant of the apartment, and speaking quite calmly, and then suddenly he stopped, and Lieutenant Hayes was quite concerned that he had become unconscious in the smoke, the heavy smoke in the apartment, that there were other occupants. He entered the apartment to make a search, at which time he was shot twice. And as I said, thankfully, he is in stable condition and he will make a full recovery. So as far as the department is concerned, we are quite pleased with that outcome, and I'll let the members of law enforcement discuss the rest.
Thank you.
We can take a few questions on this incident today.
Bob Boyce, Chief Boyce, Chief of Detectives.
Tyree Garland has 18 prior arrests. He has spent most of a good part of his life incarcerated, his adult life incarcerated. He committed a homicide when he was 16 years old here in Staten Island, not far from where that incident happened today. He was on federal parole until next year sometime. He violated the conditions of that parole. And we are investigating further what his actions were. If we look back into what was recovered right now, it's an active crime scene. We recovered 3 handguns, 1 AK-47, which was in his hands when he came out, 1 smoke grenade, 2 magazines, one which is a drum magazine with 75 rounds in it. The other is a banana clip with 30 rounds in it, and that's where we are right now. Considerable arrest history, and we consider him a very dangerous man.
This is a photo of the weapon that he exited the apartment with. That's a fully automatic version AK-47, and it was on full automatic when he exited that apartment and began shooting at the NYPD emergency service officers who were there. And again, this weapon, along with the other firearms, were recovered. These are all in the hands of an individual who certainly should not have them in the first place.
Knowing the arrest history, can you talk about the decision for Lieutenant Hayes to go in when the fire department was called, given the smoke condition that led prior to the shooting here?
Chief, Commissioner.
Well, certainly at the time, the fire officer was not aware of the person's history. There was no evidence that he was armed. There was evidence that there was a heavy smoke condition and an unknown number of occupants in the apartment. So Lieutenant Hayes made the decision to search the apartment.
There is a Facebook posting that simply says, "Today I die." That's what it says, and that happened about 7 o'clock in the morning, and around that area. That's his last Facebook posting. Before that, after that, there was nothing more. But we have other people coming into the Facebook who are making statements on it.
The girlfriend's father said that he had mental issues. We obviously know has a really long rap sheet. How does a guy like this even get a
That's to be determined as we go forward, to find out, do traces on those guns, find out where he found, where he obtained them.
How frustrating is it for you all as law enforcement that there's more people are getting hurt sometimes?
It's what we do for a living each day. So it's, unfortunately, there was a big problem in this city with illegally obtained guns.
Big problem in the country.
Yeah. He is a member, he is an OG, self-proclaimed member of the OG. He is the Nitre Gangsters. He is significant postings on that. He has some writings describing his life in the Blood gang members. All right, and that's where we are with that right now. I spoke to members of the gang division. They knew who he was. And again, I think he has some considerable following within the Bloods.
Does the suspect have a history of mental illness, sir, that you're aware of?
Nothing we can see right now. He has spent a good part of his life in jail. So we'll have to go back and look at his corrections data. He did assault someone in Rikers Island. He was arrested for that attempted murder at some point in his life. So we're peeling this back now as we go forward.
Kyle Blasio from UNF News. Commissioner Bratton, how do you think the coordination between the different agencies went in this operation?
I think it went extraordinarily well. The operation this morning with the Joint Fugitive Task Force is something that's ongoing all the time. U.S. Marshals in conjunction with members of our department that are assigned to work with them. They do these types of operations hundreds of times a year, and normally without incident. Today certainly was the exception rather than the norm. It is as you might expect, a very dangerous line of work within a profession that has more than its share of dangers. The coordination with the fire department, at the initial call to the fire department, they were on scene, I think, less than 3 minutes after the initial call for their assistance. And then the coordination, getting the fire lieutenant out of the stairwell where he had been shot. And then throughout the course of the morning, the coordination with fire department officials, health and hospitals who were there, as well as within our department, and then certainly working with the U.S. Marshal Service. So from a coordination standpoint, this is reflective of just how well it works in the city of New York.
Mayor, there's reports that you were at the gym during this entire process. Can you give any sort of...
We're briefing you all on a very serious situation, and that's just not a serious question.
Quick question for the lieutenant. I think we had successful hostage negotiations. What was different here? What went wrong? Why did we surrender? Well, I think it was a textbook scenario of how we presented ourselves. You know, we start with the basics, trying to develop a rapport. I think we did so very early on. He was cooperative with us throughout the process, the 4 hours of negotiating. Every time we would call into him on his phone, his cell phone, he would pick it up. At one point, the reception was not so great, so we offered to bring him another one of our phone that we can talk to him in more direct contact. We had it brought to the door with a robot, but he did not want to take it. He was concerned about taking it. So we continued the dialogue, and again, very cooperative, up to the point when his mom came, and very sweet with the mom, and mom was very sweet with him, and said, "Coming out now, Mama." I said, I love you back, and I put the gun down, and then right after that, the shots rang out.
In the fact that he said, "Today I die," would you say, though, that that was almost suicidal?
The only one that can really answer that, whether it was a suicide by cop phenomenon, is him. You know, it might be counterintuitive because he did come out with a vest. So if he was looking to, if he's bent on committing suicide by cop, maybe the vest might not have been a factor. He knew what he was facing. However, there was, you know, he knew there was many heavily armed police officers outside emergency service. So it's hard to determine that because of that vest, for me at least.
Just to further your point, ma'am, that came in about 7 o'clock in the morning right after. During the course of the day, as the lieutenant went back and forth, he said he would surrender to us when his mother came. So we took him at his word, and we furthered that as much as we can. So that was early on in the investigation, and we went forward after that, engaged him in conversations, sometimes with a bullhorn too, Jack, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely.
And you were here this morning earlier
Yeah.
on another hostage thing, successfully completed. Had a very busy morning in the HNT thing. So we expected him to surrender actually today.
Thank you, Chief. Thanks, everybody. We'll have pictures of this available at CCPI for you, pictures of the weapon. Thank you very much. Excuse me, folks.
My first name is Jack, J-A-C-K. His last name is Campria, C-A.